Even for spiritual seekers, it is so tempting to criticize others when they get on our nerves. What you may not realize is that every form of criticism not only blocks your spiritual growth, it actually makes the problems worse. In this episode, we break down 4 practical strategies of how to avoid criticizing others. I'm Abhinava, and this is Spirit Matters, a podcast helping modern seekers integrate their spiritual awakening into their daily life. Me and my friend and co-host Vajan are meditation teachers with over 25 years of experience, and every week we offer tips and grounded practices to deal with a modern spirituality challenge. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing, leave a comment, or rate us in your favorite podcast app. We really appreciate it. Now let's dive in. Okay, in today's episode, we wanted to talk about criticism, and we wanted also to offer some strategies of how to navigate criticism. In other words, how not to criticize. Because in the spiritual life, in spirituality, we know that criticism is not a good thing. It's not a winning strategy, so to speak, right? It's like all the spiritual masters, all the spiritual traditions, they really make the point that it is not good to criticize other people. Yet it is so part of our human nature to do that. And so why do you think it is considered not a good practice?
Well, criticism does a couple of things that are very detrimental to our well-being. And the first thing is it damages the person that you're criticizing. So obviously it's reputational damage, so it's social damage, but also happens on a more subtle level as well. When you're speaking ill of someone, when you're sending ill intentions their way, it does have some effect on their being in some form. And you can see that whether someone gets sick or just feels depressed or unhappy, it can have all sorts of terrible impacts. And you see that a lot with bullying, and especially with social media type of bullying, where people are able to bully people at all hours of the day and night. It really has catastrophic effects on people's psychological well-being, their health, and all of those things. But the other terrible impact it has is on you as the person who's speaking ill of.
Right. Interesting.
Because it brings forward your own darkness. It brings forward your own maliciousness, all of the weaknesses in you that get joy from.
So why is that? Because if I have somebody, a colleague who is really, not a nice person, let's say it mildly, he's just really doing everything to kind of like get on people's nerves, and he's very successful, let's say. And so if I criticize that colleague to my other colleagues, I'm like, this guy is such an impossible person, he's like always such a big ego, he's so arrogant, he's like putting all the attention on himself. And I mean, why is that bringing to the fore my own darkness? And am I not right to say those things?
Well, I think the thing is we want to look at the world from a higher perspective rather than a lower perspective. If we're down in the dirt and the muck with other people and we're just constantly throwing insults and throwing accusations and criticisms at each other, nothing will ever change. We'll never elevate the people around us by criticizing them.
Right. It doesn't solve anything.
No, it doesn't bring people up to some higher level. If you go to someone and you list everything you think he is doing wrong, it doesn't improve your relationship with
So it's not that the other person says, hey, this person has a point, let me change my nature. It doesn't work like that?
No one gets a notepad out and then jots down all of your criticisms and then takes those away to diligently work on them for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
That's really not, because at the end of the day, that's not even what you're really trying to do. And very often you have to be careful that if you feel that you are the righteous one and you're out there in the world pointing out the flaws in everyone else, you can say that I'm doing it to try and make the world a better place.
Yeah.
But I'm always very suspicious of you being the righteous and good person and also being able to hurt and bring down other people, because that seems very convenient for the nasty, the unillumined parts of our being.
But is there a way to tell somebody who is really misbehaving in some way, to tell them about their flaws or weaknesses in a way that will help them, that is not criticism?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a way to do that. And a lot of that comes from your intention and your oneness with the person. And so I've got a lot of beautiful friends all around the world, and I'm really lucky to get to spend time with them in their lives, in their homes or in their communities, and just see how they operate in their day-to-day lives. And because I'm coming in from an outside perspective, very often I can see habits they've picked up or things that are going on that I just notice are not serving them or not serving the people around them. And very often I'm able to actually communicate that to the person, but that's only because that they feel that I have the intention that I really care for them and I want to see them really flourishing in life. And there's a real sense of oneness.
Well, I can definitely testify to that, because you've done that to me as well. We've known each other for so many years, and you do it with a sense of humor, which I really enjoy. So you don't feel attacked. You make a really sharp observation, and you will tell that with a kind of like a sense of humor and kind of a nice way to say it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the intention. You say you really feel it comes from a place of love and not from a place of criticism from the ego. Yeah, and I think that's very important what you said earlier about how it brings to the fore the darkness inside us, which is what happens when you truly criticize someone. Is because we're focusing on that black spot, that darkness in the other ones, because we're talking about that, we actually unconsciously bring that to the fore in ourselves. So we're actually stalling our own spiritual growth at that moment.
Yeah, and that lower part of our being gets joy from
Malicious pleasure.
malicious pleasure from attacking others.
I mean, that's the whole thing of gossip, right? Gossip is like criticism taken to a communal level,
Yes.
because we don't gossip by ourselves. We need other people for that. And why is that so enjoyable? So why do so many people enjoy gossip? Well, something in us knows that it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, and so we've talked previously that the basis of human culture and human social life is the tribal situation. And so tribes would tend to be limited to 100 to 120 people. And once a tribe grew to that size, the tribe would tend to have a subgroup break off from it and then go off on their own way. Because when you get more than that sort of 100 people, it's really hard to actually have social relations between that number of people. So you actually don't know everyone in the group. And so at some point, some subset of the group will get upset or disgruntled, or there'll be an incident and they will leave and form their own group. But if you're looking at that sort of setting, there is value in talking and knowing about there. Because if there's 100 people I interact with, and I've got 20 or 30 people I closely interact with on a regular basis, I can know those people quite well. But there'll be people in the orbit around me that will be in my tribe, so to speak, but I don't actually know them that well. And then in those settings, like having a friend who can say, oh, this person, this is what their character is like. This person over there, this is their character. And one of the things you're looking for is, who can I trust? Like, you want to know, is this person someone that I...
Yeah, because your survival depends on it.
Yeah, and so if you hear that they're doing terrible things to someone else, it gives you a sense like, okay, I should be careful around that person.
And that is still kind of a function of, let's say, gossip or criticism in a social setting, that you sometimes need to know who you can trust and who, you perhaps have to be careful around.
Yeah, so I think that's why it continually comes up, because we haven't evolved past that in our human interactions. We're still in some way a creature of our environments.
And I would also add that it gives some subtle joy to the ego, because the ego likes to be superior, right? One of the qualities of the ego, it wants to be special. And so if we speak ill of other people, what happens is that our ego, in a subtle way, we feel superior to that person.
Yeah.
And so we feel, although we're not saying it out loud, the subtext here is, I'm better than that person. That person is wrong and has this weakness and that weakness. And we're talking about that, and it makes us all, elevated, but not in a nice spiritual way, but in an egotistical way.
Yeah.
That we feel superior to the other person. And that's why it gives us that malicious joy.
Yeah.
That's just ego-based.
Yeah. So one of the key things that I like to think, so I've got a couple of strategies that I use around criticism. And so if I see someone acting in a way that I find difficult to deal with, or I find challenging in some way, I've probably got two main strategies that I've personally used. And so the first of them is, I imagine to myself that if I was in the unique situation and finding myself with the problems of life, I'm in their situation, I would probably be acting worse.
That's a good one.
So that keeps me really humble, that I realize, because that ties in with the other strategy that I use, is that I put myself in the shoes that I don't know all of the complex experiences that that person has had that is causing them to see the world in which they're seeing it, the way in which they're seeing the world. So they're seeing the world differently than I am. And that goes back over all of their lifetimes, over all of their incarnations. All of the experiences I've been through is causing them to see the world in a certain way. And their behavior makes total sense if I could see the world through their eyes.
Okay, so let's take then the case of a murderer or a psychopath. Like they're going out abusing people, deceiving people. Is that really understandable from that point of view? Like those are destructive behaviors.
Yeah, I mean, very often if you look back at the storylines of the lives of those people, is just untold tragedy and trauma.
Mm.
And so for someone who has been through that untold tragedy and trauma, it's like there's a great saying that's hurt people hurt people. And so people who have been through tremendous, violence and trauma, they tend to act that out again and again. And so I'm not saying it's right, but
for them, it's what they're used to. It's for them, it's almost feels safe.
Yeah, it's like there is a basis in the world as to why they're acting like that. But I think for the vast majority of people, it's just simply an unawareness of how other people are seeing the situations. So if you're someone who's been brought up in a certain environment and you've been shown certain things are valuable, so say you're in your environment, being very timely is the most important thing. So in that situation, then you'll leave your house in the morning in a great mess, because for you, the higher value is actually getting to the place that you need to on time. Whereas someone else has been brought up in an environment where cleanliness is the most important thing. So they may spend a lot more time, getting their house tidied and organized before they go anywhere.
So, now I understand. People who are late, they actually have a very clean house. Yeah. I should remember that, because it really upsets me. I'm a timely person. So when somebody's late, I just have to remember, wow, they have such a clean house.
Exactly. You remember that. You think, wow, they probably spent that last few minutes wiping down all the surfaces.
Exactly.
Hanging up the tea towel and then, politely closing the door on the way out.
I can forgive them for that.
So, but I think that's a really powerful strategy, is realizing that everyone is seeing the world differently. Like no one is seeing the world in exactly the way you see the world. So your values are for you and you alone, onto other people. And as soon as you do, you're limiting that person's manifestation. You're limiting their full expression of everything they've learned, everything they know. And so, and the thing is as well, who gave you the role of being the judge in this world?
Yeah.
Because if you think that's your role...
Well, you may think that person really doesn't see, and it's so obvious to everyone else. Yeah. So I'm helping the person to see that.
You always have to be very wary when you can see all of these faults in other people's lives. You should always be very suspicious that, what am I not seeing in my own life? Because that is always the glaring blind spot that we're all dealing with, that we all, living from this completely subjective perspective, can't see the way the world sees us.
So how do we overcome our weaknesses, which we have to overcome, which, if we want to improve ourselves and grow spiritually, we want to transcend those weaknesses in our nature. But if nobody points them out to us, like, how do we transcend them? We have to become aware of them, right?
Yeah.
You agree with that?
So awareness is the key thing.
Yeah.
And what I think is we want to take that awareness back to the deepest level possible. So if you're just watching your actions and seeing what your actions are, you might be able to catch yourself before you do some wrong actions. You do something unconsciously, or you do something that could be seen as being careless or uncaring towards the people around you. But you still don't know why, like where was the intention and what was the thought pattern that led to that action. And I think that's the key thing to start changing. Like if you can really watch your thoughts and the ideas and your intentions, that's like the step before you actually act. So changing actions is all well and good, but it's coming too late in the piece. Like you want to start to change the way that you think about the world.
The causes of those actions.
Exactly. So those causal units, you want to get back to those, because that's going to be the most fundamental long-term change.
And I think also life will show you where you are falling short. It's not that people have to tell you point blank that this is your weakness, but if you become a little bit more observant or a little bit more aware, you will know that, hey, these people seem to, not like me, or like shy away from me whenever I do this behavior.
Yeah.
And so if you're observant, hey, there's something that I can work on. And life will definitely mirror that back to you. So I don't think we have to worry about needing people people to point that out.
Yeah. So I know. So those were my two main strategies. And I like that idea of making yourself humble enough to realize that if you were living someone else's life, you'd probably be doing it worse than they were.
Yeah,
And
that's a very good one. And
if
even if you don't, just pretend you would,
yeah,
because that's necessary to overcome the criticism.
yeah, because the one thing that we've talked about before, there's this great idea that if all of the world's problems were collected together and thrown into a large pool, and then you were given the opportunity to choose any set of problems that you wanted from that pool, so you had to choose a set of problems. The set of problems you would choose would be probably the exact problems that you're facing right now, because there's something about those problems that's uniquely suited to you and you alone. And everyone else, if they look at those problems, they would, you see that when you look at your other friends or colleagues or workmates, and you see, God, like, can they not see how simple their problem is? But for you, your problems are so uniquely suited to your particular character and your particular depth that it's going to be most challenging and most interesting for you to overcome the problems that you actually have.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So, as for a spiritual strategy, I wanted to read out the philosophy for the new millennium by Sri Chinmoy, because he's given a very clear directive as to how to deal with criticism. And this was his philosophy for the new millennium. We talked about this in an earlier episode, so check that out. It's a longer conversation that we had about the philosophy for the new millennium. And I just read it out now. This is by Sri Chinmoy. The philosophy for the new millennium will be: do not see faults in anybody's life. Do not see the faults in your own life. Only force yourself to see all the good things you have done, all the good things you're planning to do, and all the good things that others have done. In the next millennium, the goal of philosophy will be only to see the light in oneself and the light in others. Then only will you be able to expedite the arrival of world peace and world oneness. So it's this idea of radically seeing only the light and not the dark. And that's what we talked about. If you focus on the light, you bring that to the fore, not only in the other person, but also in yourself. And ultimately, light is what's going to transform darkness. And so we can call these weaknesses or these limitations part of darkness. It's kind of the umbrella term, or ignorance. And, with Socrates, we should be able to say, I know that I don't know. And by knowing that, I know a little bit more than everybody else, because we are usually not aware of our blind spots. But accepting that we have weaknesses, that we are in ignorance, is step number one. And then to focus absolutely radically just on the light. But now, of course, I can hear people say, yeah, but is that not naive to only see the light? Like, what about all this other stuff that's going on? Should we not pay any attention to that? Will people not just abuse us then? And will the world not just crush us?
Yeah, because one of the things I take away from that, listening to it again now, is it's talking about the difference between the path of the mind and the path of the heart. And we've really been walking the path of the mind for hundreds of years now. And we've seen that although it's led to tremendous progress in the external world and in the level of comfort, the level material prosperity, it has not led to the cessation of conflicts and problems between nations in the world. And really, the world we live in now is a product of the mind. And we see that like everywhere around us, everywhere we look, it's about stimulation, it's about novelty, it's about um, anything to bring about stimulation and activity in the mind. We're surrounded by all of these things.
Yeah.
And the very nature of the mind is to separate the world, and it's to judge and to criticize. All these things go hand in hand. And I think when we can learn to make our life a little bit stiller, a little bit calmer, we can make our mind a little bit stiller and a little bit calmer, then we can start to feel that there's a deeper part of our being that we can experience life from. And this is a way of life that we've never seen adopted in large scale. So we may have seen this in small communities or in small monasteries or ashrams, spiritual communities. We may have seen groups of people coming together and living from the heart more than the. And whenever you get a glimpse of that, or even with a small group of people, you sense the tremendous transformation that the world would go through if people were interacting from the point of view of the heart, which is the capacity of the heart is the capacity of oneness, of connection, of understanding, of love. And
Yeah, and I have to testify to that because now we are both on our retreat here in New York with our spiritual community. And we live on a path which is the path of the heart. We really meditate on our heart and try to bring to the fore the qualities of the heart. And I always come away here with this tremendous boost and such a positive and enthusiastic feeling for my life and for the world. Because when you interact like that for 10 days or 2 weeks and you're constantly in that consciousness of the heart, yeah, you really see the potential, the amazing potential of this world to live in unity and not to live in the mind-based ignorance, because I think ultimately the mind is division and the heart is unity. Like if you have to separate them in a very simple way, the mind likes to divide. And it's useful to divide reality sometimes if you want to organize your life or structure things. But yeah, in terms of leading a happy life and a life of meaning and wisdom, we really need the heart.
yeah, it'll be really interesting when people look back from in the future, look on this time that we're living through now. I think in some ways people will see like, oh my God, I can't believe those people, those poor people had to live through all of this time where the mind was the major part of their being that they existed from. Because the mind is not going to provide you satisfaction. It's not going to provide you joy that is lasting joy. It's going to provide you small amounts of pleasure. It's going to provide you, especially at this time, it's providing you small hits of dopamine. We've become, in some ways, dopamine addicts.
Yeah.
And so many of the activities we do is to get these small amounts of dopamine, which are so short lived. And they don't give us that deep sense of enjoyment or satisfaction or meaning that we're looking for. And I really hope to see that humanity, as we move forward through time, that we start to see the power of the heart and we start to realize that that's the true superpower that we have, that we've got this ability to connect with deeper levels of consciousness, fundamental consciousness that perhaps connects us all and allows us to experience life in a far more rich and fulfilling way than our mind.
Yeah, and if you think about how do I go about seeing only the light in others, like you cannot actually achieve that through the mind because the mind will always see the dark spots. Whereas you have to go to the heart for that. The heart has that capacity to see the light. So that's, I think, one of the main differences. The mind has both light and darkness, and it's almost attracted more in a more subtle way to the darkness. We feel that when we start to meditate and a negative thought comes during our meditation, sometimes we want to cling to that. It's like, oh yeah, it's important. It can be fear or doubt or worry or anxiety. They just come to us and somehow we make them important.
Yeah, the mind has a very strong negative bias. And we
Yes.
just need to think about if we get 100 pieces of positive feedback and then we get one criticism,
Yeah.
we'll always remember the one criticism
Yeah.
always stings more than the 100 pieces of positive feedback.
I mean, it's funny because I have a personal story from my Waffle House, from
Yeah.
my lunchroom. I've had so many amazing reviews and feedback, and I very often ask the guests after did you enjoy everything? How was it? And always people are like, it was amazing. Thank you so much. It was great. But one time there was a lady, and I don't think she was in a good mood, and she said, no, I didn't like it. And she left. And I still remember that. That is like the one time when somebody did not like what we offered.
Yeah.
And so that's still stuck with me all those years. And it's like this little drop of poison that can ruin a whole glass of milk.
Yeah, so if you know that's the nature of the mind, thinking that through your mind you're somehow going to find abiding happiness and satisfaction, it seems a forlorn task that you're never going to get there because you're always just one comment, one nasty barb, one problem away from losing whatever sense of peace and joy that you'd had. And that's really the power of the heart. But the thing is, for you to get from your mind into your heart, it requires a tremendous amount of stilling, requires the ability to stay present and connected for long periods of time. So it takes people quite a process to go from living a mind-based existence to a heart-based existence. It's not something you can just flick a switch and say, oh, well, from today onwards,
No.
I'm going to live only in the heart, because your life is made up of habitual patterns, and your mind is like you've talked before, there's these deep grooves that you've cut into reality, and they're the grooves of where your awareness finds itself. And your awareness nearly always for people keeps on finding itself stuck in the groove of the mind's activity. And often that negativity and all of those things that come with that. But you do see people who have been trying for some period of time to live in a different way. And it might be someone living in a contemplative or meditative community or in a spiritual community of some sort. And you can see that over many years, they've began the process of living a life with more depth
Yeah.
and more stillness.
I would say that can already be achieved pretty soon if you have a daily practice. So if every day you focus on your heart and actually literally focus on the spiritual heart in the center of your chest through a meditative practice where you concentrate there and you try first to still your mind and then try really to focus here, and you could visualize a flower or a beautiful sun. And then that brings to the fore the consciousness of the heart, little by little. And there's one aphorism by Sri Chinmoy that I like so much. It's, man can be happy and safe only when the heart feels faster than the mind thinks. And so that's the idea here. We want to make the heart stronger so that it actually feels faster than that very judgmental mind who always criticizes and sees the negative things.
Yeah, and if you're always feeding the mind becomes very rapid in its response to every stimulus in the world.
Yeah.
Whereas if you suddenly start putting yourself, instead of feeding the mind, and you want to be feeling from the heart, it allows you to then experience each situation, each moment in a very, very different type of way.
And our current technological age with the social media even exacerbates that, right? It makes the mind's hunger, it makes it worse and worse, where we can kind of get stuck in this dopamine addicted, short-term happiness. It makes the mind so much stronger.
Yeah.
So it's so much harder then to go back to that stillness of the heart.
If people were wise, if people were really sincere with themselves and looked at what had given them joy and happiness in life, I think they would look back and they would find very few moments where their joy in their life came from the mind. And instead it would be moments, like brief moments, where they were outside of their mind, where they were in their embodied heart, or they were connecting with loved ones, when they were experiencing the world, rather than thinking about the world or separating themselves from the world. And so if you were wise and understood that the mind is not the vessel or the vehicle that is going to take you to happiness, you would very quickly realize that the heart that is the one part of your being that has that capacity, that to take you beyond the ups and downs of life and the pains and suffering. And instead, your life could become like a great journey of exploration and adventure and connection and love and joy and all of these things that you're really actually looking for. It just would come from you doing a daily practice.
Yeah, and to tie it back to our subject, if you are in the heart, you won't feel any inspiration or inclination to criticize other people. You will see from a very natural way, you will see the good in them.
Yeah.
And so that one of my strategies is really to focus on the divine in others. So to know that other people, everybody has a soul, a divine part. And not only to know that in a mental way, but to actually practice that by speaking directly to the soul when you're interacting with another person, to kind of see perhaps a sun in their heart or a flower or a beautiful divine child even, and to really connect with that aspect. And that immediately changes the vibrational energy of the interaction. And when you do that, you have to know that the soul is perfect, right? So our highest self does not have these limitations and weaknesses that our character, our human persona has. Like, of course, we have all these weaknesses and limitations because it's part of the game.
Some faulty script writing.
No, it's not. It's actually part of the game. We have to, we have to navigate our way to the soul through all these hurdles. But if we focus that what really represents the other person is not their weaknesses, is not their limitations, but is the soul. And if you take that as their true self and interact with that, then you can so easily forgive those limitations and weaknesses. So I really go from a state that says the weaknesses do not represent that person. So they can annoy me, they can irritate me, but it's not their real self. And to really see their real self is the soul, is perfection already. And to practice that a few times when you interact with people, especially people who do get on your nerves, I think is a good way to overcome the inclination to immediately criticize and feel that negativity coming to the fore.
Yeah, and very often the reason that we can't connect with other people, we find frustration and aggravation in the relationships, is we're not actually seeing the other person. We're seeing a picture that we've created of who we think they are. And so we're not actually dealing with the person themselves. We're creating this persona, we're creating this character, this caricature
Yeah.
of the person and projecting that onto them, because how well do we really know these other people?
No, and it's always when we're being criticized, you sometimes are so surprised at how people see you. You're like,
Yeah.
really? That is who you think I am?
Yeah.
It's like so very often, like you say, it's just this whole persona that they've built up in their minds.
And so that game is actually one of the most meaningful, enjoyable games to play, of trying to see the divine in other people. And if you take yourself, like on the deepest fundamental level, that you are a manifestation of divine consciousness here on earth, and you realize that all other beings are also manifestations of divine consciousness, you understand that there is a oneness between the two of you that transcends the character and the form and all of those outer aspects. And then the really fascinating thing is trying to see that divinity inside the other person,
Yeah.
trying to communicate and talk to them in such a way that it allows that divinity to
How do you do that? You're very good at that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to have an openness and a curiosity. Like, I think curiosity is an completely undervalued superpower, because a lot of us feel that we're too busy to be curious about other people. Our responsibilities, the things that we're doing, are just so monumentally important and valuable that we just don't have time to be involved in other people's lives. And the thing I would say, I think you've got it 180 degrees wrong, because I think the monumentally important thing is to be here and to be of service to God when he comes to you, is this person and that person and this person and all of his infinite different forms. And I've had moments when I have seen and felt that. I remember at the airport in Istanbul 2 years ago, I was traveling back to New Zealand from Istanbul, through Istanbul, and I was walking through the airport, and there's this period of time where I was really in the heart, and I was so grateful we'd been on a spiritual retreat where we started our podcast. And I was just feeling so grateful and so present that I was just walking through the airport. Everyone walking past, I saw the divine. I felt they were the divine in an infinite number of forms. And you would see each form only for a moment as they walked past. But I was so enraptured. It was so enjoyable having this experience. And then I finally get to my airline counter and I see there's a huge line. And then I'm like, crash back down. But for that period of time,
Yeah.
it was so meaningful just
Yeah.
to be walking through. It's the many faces of God all around you.
This can be a real practice. I remember a time when I was a student still, or just out of high school. We did Interrail in Europe. So we traveled by train, and we went to visit all these different European cities with my friends. And I remember being in an Italian city at some point, and I was just by myself. I was sitting on the edge of this fountain in the middle of the square of this really busy city. And I was just looking, I was just observing life. And I wasn't meditating at the time consciously, but I came into this very meditative state where I just saw life passing by. And I think unconsciously I was seeing the divine in that life flow. And if you can actually do that, you can sit somewhere where life passes you by and try to feel that this is the divine flow. Everything that you see, there is a divine force operating there. And in every human being that you see, feel that that is a portion of divinity. That is actually God in human form coming by.
And the part of the practice as well is not naming anything. So as soon as you name the thing that you're seeing, you lose something. You start to separate it. It's like when you go to the forest. If you go into the forest and you start going tree, branch, squirrel, you miss the whole, because you're separating into the parts.
Yeah, so that's where knowledge can be a limitation on the actual experience. If you know too much, you start to categorize everything. You miss the essence.
And we can take that back to our interactions with people. If instead of feeling like from our mind we have to name and categorize them and their behaviors and their actions and say this is good, this is bad, all we're doing is creating polarities. And the truth is always somewhere in the middle. We always should be trying to find ourselves back to the midpoint. And if you can experience people as just, another aspect of divine consciousness here having its own unique experiences, it doesn't need you to judge it. It's not even, you haven't even been asked or tasked with this role of being the world judge. But so many of us as humans are walking around and feeling as though that is our role here, that we are here to judge all and sundry, everything that comes across your path. You have to give it a mark, or you have to say it is either a good thing or a bad thing. And that's one of the things that the mind can't stand. It can't stand the polarity that something can be both good and bad. It could be, it's like we're always judging everything, like whether something is pleasurable or painful, whether it's good or bad, something we should chase after or we should run away from. And we don't allow things just to be. We don't allow experiences. We don't allow people just to be as
Isn't
they.
that acceptance in ultimate form?
Yeah,
It's like the acceptance of life, which
yeah,
was once the name of our podcast,
yeah,
and which is also the philosophy of Sri Chinmoy in a nutshell. He said,
yeah,
"My philosophy is the acceptance of life for the transformation of life." And what you just described to me is the acceptance of life,
yeah.
without any resistance.
And as soon as you accept it and it goes beyond, because when you're still caught in the game of good and bad and
You're not actually accepting, right?
no, you're still caught in the game of labeling and judging. And as soon as you just say all that is what is, you suddenly have stepped onto another plane and you're not playing the same game
Okay, so what about the wars in the world? There's this wars going on now with Iran. There's this war in Israel,
yeah.
in
And
Ukraine.
there has always been wars
Okay,
going on since.
but do we just have to accept that and not do anything about it?
So, I mean, for me, it's the question is, what is my role here? Like, what am I here to do? Am I here to become a politician and to be involved in the governments of the world and their decision making? And is that the game that will cause transformation for humanity? And I don't believe that is. And I don't believe many people are looking to world governments or world organizations now to be the transformative force. In some ways, even I remember I was in Ireland and I heard a prayer from some Christian monks who lived on an island from 1,000 years ago. And they asked God to bless the rulers of the land with wisdom enough so that their actions, the rulers, the government, did not affect the lives of the monks. And I think that's all we can ask for from the government, that their actions have enough wisdom that it doesn't cause us an inordinate amount of hardship, but they give us the space so we can do the work that we're here to do. And for us, I don't believe that our role is to be involved in politics or to be involved in these types of world situations. I think each of us has been given a task that transcends all of those things.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And so for us as people playing the spiritual game, I think that will be the thing that people will look back and say, wow, those people were the people playing the spiritual game throughout time. Like when I look back over the centuries before ours, I see the spiritual aspirants and the people who were really living deeply meditative lives. I see them as the forerunners of a new way of life. They were people who were finding themselves more in alignment with the true nature of life. And we're following along that path. And hopefully over time, we're widening that path. So the people coming behind us, they find it easier to follow the way.
Very, very well said. And I think now already we're seeing that, whereas more and more people are starting to discover spirituality. And so for those of you who are in that situation, that it can be a lonely time when you go through a spiritual awakening, and it can be confusing, but there is real beauty and real meaning and real joy at the other side. So just keep practicing, keep going forward, and eventually I guess you'll get there. And
Yeah.
so I think also one other thing I would say is that Sri Chinmoy once commented that people underestimate the power of prayer. And so we can actually pray for world peace,
Yeah.
and not be naive about it, that it will immediately, our prayers will be answered and the next week there will be world peace. But all these prayers over time accumulate, and they bring down a little bit of light into the earth atmosphere. And light changes consciousness, and we are all connected to this universal consciousness. And each prayer and each meditation for peace, they will have an effect.
Yeah. And if you really think that you want to bring about the end of conflict in the world outside of yourself, I think the big mistake you're making is you're not looking inside yourself and see the conflict that you're causing both within your own consciousness and then also with the people around yourself. And I think that's a great time for people in glass houses should not throw stones. And if you claim that you're believing in peace, but in your own relations with yourself or with the people around you, you are criticizing, you are using hurtful language, you're trying to bring other people down and causing suffering in the smallest space that you actually control, then you're not actually living in alignment with what you claim to believe. And so I think always taking it back and starting with what is the one part of the world that I have true sovereignty and responsibility for. And first of all, that's my own consciousness. And then when I have my own consciousness is in alignment with what I value, then actually making sure I'm acting playing that out in the interactions I have in the world. And if you're not doing those two things, and instead you're trying to go out further afield and tell everyone you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you don't have a solid foundation to be standing on to be criticizing you.
It's another form of criticism, basically, to
Yeah.
criticize governments. So, well, you may be right in your criticism. We're
Yeah.
not saying that that is not true,
Yeah.
but it will not help the world. It will not help you, and it will not bring about world peace.
Yeah.
But one other thing I wanted to talk about is when you are criticized. So when you yourself are being criticized, and there was a spiritual master from the beginning of the 20th century, Swami Vivekananda, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, who was actually the first Indian spiritual man who came to America. So in 1893, he gave his famous address to the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago. And he said, when you're criticized, you have to feel that you're an elephant and that you're going to the market to get bananas. That's the goal of the elephant. You're just walking to the market. And while you're walking to the market, these dogs are just barking at you. But the elephant, he knows he's much stronger than the dogs. He's not fazed by their barking. So he just ignores them. He just walks to the market. And he said that's a great way to deal with criticism. Just feel that you're the elephant and these people criticizing you, they're just the dogs that are barking on the side. But you do your thing. You go to the market and get your bananas.
Yeah, and when we're really aligned with who we truly are, like I was saying before, like if we've put our own inner to ourselves inwardly in a way that's in tune with our deepest values, then that starts to give you a really strong foundation. If you know that your inner world is harmonious and in alignment, then you start to be less aggravated when people start to try and criticize you or point out things that you were hoping nobody would notice. But once you've got that going on and you're inwardly you want to start to realize that not everyone's opinion is equally valuable. And we live in a time where everyone feels as though they have a right to criticize, to judge, to label. And the classic example of this now is in restaurant reviews. And as you know, everyone in the world now is the world's greatest authority on restaurants.
Is a food critic.
Yeah, everyone now is a food critic. So you can only imagine how painful it is for great restaurants in the world to be being judged and criticized by people who they know that these people don't understand, the deeper realities or the deeper aspects of actually trying to run a successful food enterprise.
Yeah.
It's, a very difficult and challenging business. But it's the same in all areas of our life. It's very easy for other people to feel as though they know better than us. But because they're not seeing the world from our perspective, they're not seeing what we're seeing, they may totally be misunderstanding what we're trying to achieve, what direction we're going in, because they may be judging us against their values, against which direction they are heading in. And they'll see us doing something slightly different. And then if they criticize, oh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, it can be completely misguided for you because it's not actually seeing what you're hoping to achieve, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what you're trying to manifest in the world. So having some inner confidence, which really comes from that first step of having your inner relationship put together well. So all the parts of your being integrated and in alignment. And then when you start going out into the world and doing things, realizing that not everyone is seeing what you're seeing. So their judgments of you are going to be perhaps incorrect or just not valuable to you.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about this in a previous episode, that I think a really good rule of thumb is that if you would not go to the person for their advice, do not accept their criticism, because their criticism then can be very misguided or have malicious intent, or there can be so many things wrong with what they're trying to see and tell you.
If it comes from people who really love you and who know you love you, you can take it a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good one. I just wanted to also say 2 aphorisms by Sri Chinmoy, which kind of touch on this topic. And one of them is, be kind, be all sympathy, for each and every human being is forced to fight against himself. And this really nicely ties into what you were talking about earlier, that everybody has problems. Everybody has their circumstances and situations, and we simply don't know. So just to be kind, instead of criticism, have the attitude that you will be all kind and all sympathy to other people. And that's also a basis where you can function from. If that's your baseline, it's kindness and sympathy,
Yeah.
then I think criticism will not make its way so quickly into your consciousness.
Yeah. And I think some people are in a habit of almost creating conflict and creating problems because they feel that that is what is they see themselves in the way that makes it that is the right response for the world to give them, that the world should be beating them down because they are, a terrible person or a hopeless person. And in those situations where instead of criticizing them or trying to tell them that everything they're doing is wrong, the most transformative thing you can do in that moment is to offer your kindness and your oneness and your sympathy to them. And then that could be the thing that opens their eyes and starts to change their experience of life.
Yeah, as well. So, and the second one is just also when Sri Chinmoy zooms out to the Supreme, to God, let's say, and he wrote this aphorism: "It thrills God's heart to the core that I never speak ill of anybody at any time."
Mm.
And so, if you think about the Supreme who created this world, if you are the creator, you created this wonderful world with all the good intentions, and you see that people are just criticizing each other.
Yeah.
That's painful,
Yeah. If we take it to the idea of the divine play or the divine Leela as well, as you've been in many theatrical productions. I not so many, but I can imagine if the members of cast who are on stage are just constantly criticizing each other's performance, it really will bring the whole energy down. It's really going to spoil the whole experience.
Will not work. No, it's not going to be a Broadway production.
No, because you see when the cast and crew are together on stage, it's almost like there's so much goodwill between each of the performers that they want to see you act out your character in the best possible way, and you in the reverse want to see them act out their character in the best possible way, and that becomes so enjoyable for the audience to watch when they see all of these people, radically different characters, but they're there, and there's this intentionality that they want each other to do the best possible performance. And if we could have that as a humanity with, the billions of souls here, and we really wanted to celebrate all of the other characters on the stage. And that's the thing. Sometimes when I see people doing something that I just cannot understand what they're doing, I just think, wow, that's so great to see that someone is doing this thing. It's not my thing at all, but I don't put that as lower than me. It's
right.
Oh, well, that's obviously...
You may just not understand it.
Yeah, it's like they're doing something that I have no idea about. And it's just so great that they're here and that character is being acted out, because the variety, I think that's what the nature of this universe is. There's something very special about the multifarious manifestation of the divine in this universe, because otherwise, why would there be the trillions of solar systems and the billions of galaxies? It seems excessive in every single possible way. And if you look at our own planet, the amount of life here, it's not like, okay, there's 100 species or there's 1,000 species. It's
millions.
There's this untold richness and creativity being acted out. And so it only makes sense for me that in the human realm that we need all of this variety. And this is the thing that gives the divine some sense of joy and meaning in this whole theatrical production. 13.7 billion years in the making.
Yeah, and we're not done yet. So just to summarize the strategies, how to not criticize is, starting with yours, is to imagine that you are in their situation and you would do worse, and tied with that because you don't know their situation. So to feel that you don't know the circumstances to which they came to that behavior that you're now criticizing or tempted to criticize. So to put yourself in their shoes, to tie it back to Sri Chinmoy's philosophy for the new millennium, to try and see the light in others, to see the divine in others, and practice that. Sit somewhere and see life pass by and see the divine in other people. And then also to feel that the weaknesses and limitations of others do not represent them, do not represent their real self.
Yeah.
That's the third one. They represent, their real self is divine, is the soul, is beyond all the imperfections and limitations.
Infinite consciousness in that very small human form.
Unbelievable. It's a miracle.
How did it fit in there?
And the last one, I would say the fourth one, is to feel that we're all part of team humanity, and we need everybody's unique qualities, and to celebrate the differences instead of criticizing. Yeah. So
great.
We'll wrap up with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for listening to us. If you enjoyed our content, hey, why don't you leave a comment for us, or why don't you rate us in a podcast app? We really read all the comments, and we're so happy if you engage with us in that way. And if you have any idea or some topic that you want us to talk about, let us know as well, and we'll try and fit that in. And so for now, we'll say goodbye here in New York, and hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.